honor your oaths and nullify now.
We want a federal government that obeys the Constitution, and we want a state government that will stand up to defend the citizens of North Carolina when the federal government overreaches. And that's what this rally was about. It was honor the oath. We were here to remind the members of the General Assembly to honor their oaths of office, to uphold and defend the state and federal constitutions. Simple as that.
I saw the theme of the rally was really about health care.
Right, that's one of them.
That's one of them. So why don't you start with health care and then work into what the others were?
Okay, well, one of the issues has to deal with the Affordable Care Act. The reason health care is broken in the United States, and let's be real here, health care is broken. But the reason it's broken is because of the involvement of HMOs and health insurance companies that charge way too much, provide too little services, and walk away with millions and millions of dollars in profit. If we want to get away from broken healthcare, we have to get away from the HMO system. Now, the problem with the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is what they've done is they have forced every American to purchase from HMOs. So we're contributing to the very problem that broke healthcare in the first place. The U.S. Constitution does not give them the authority to dictate our healthcare.
We are here today because we know in our gut and our core something is wrong in this country. When our inalienable rights, our Bill of Rights, are being attacked at every time we turn. But yet, all 10 of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto planks are law in our land today. Their paths are clear. Slavery, serfdom, or freedom and liberty. We choose liberty.
We're happy that in the state we have the Republican Party in leadership, because the Republican Party has a history of being compliant with the Constitution. They haven't always carried it out very well, which is why we're here today, to make sure that they do. But it's not just that we like Republicans and we don't like Democrats, it's we like the Constitution.
So now that you have these supermajorities and the governor's mansion, who would oppose the agenda that you're forwarding?
Well, there are some members of the Republican establishment that I'm not going to name who worry that the Civil War has decided the issue as to whether or not the states are sovereign. Well, the Civil War didn't change the United States Constitution. The United States Constitution was set up in such a way that the states were sovereign over the federal government, and that the individual people like you and me were sovereign over the states. And we've turned all that upside down, which is why, you know, we can see our freedom running away from us. We have to be careful of establishment members in both parties who are going to oppose the agenda to restore state sovereignty. The federal government has walked away from the Constitution for so long. If they hadn't, we wouldn't be talking about gun bans right now. If they hadn't, we wouldn't be talking about food safety regulation right now. So there's a lot of things that the federal government's doing that's not authorized in the Constitution. More than any specific issues, like social issues or fiscal issues, we want government that obeys the Constitution. That wraps up everything else. If it obeys the Constitution, it's only about 20% of its current size. The spending goes way down. If they obey the Constitution, they don't have the authority to prosecute the war on drugs. So a lot of our prisons start emptying out. So all the issues that are inherent with going back to the type of government we're talking about, the Ron Paul type platform, exist in obeying the Constitution. All we have to do is obey the whole Constitution, and we're already there. So that's really what we're rallying around. Is not one issue, not abortion, not social issues, not fiscal issues. We're rallying around the Constitution itself.
You probably have to agree it's an interpretation of the Constitution.
It is, but it's the interpretation of the people that wrote it. One of the things that a lot of people seem to forget is the people that actually wrote the Constitution produced two works, the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers. Every word they wrote, they told us what it means, specifically. So when we go around and they try to say, well, that's your interpretation of the Constitution, it's different than Justice Roberts, well, then Justice Roberts is wrong, because the people who actually wrote the Constitution told us what they meant.
So you're saying that in the Constitution there are measures that undo the power of the Supreme Court to rule on what's constitutional, and that there are people that have some other power above the Supreme Court? Well,
no. Yes and no. In Article 3 of the United States Constitution, it talks about the judiciary, and it does not give the judiciary the power of judicial review. Judicial review is where the Supreme Court goes and they review a law, they decide whether it's constitutional or not, and then they either send it back or don't. By violating judicial review, one of the things we did with the Affordable Care Act is John Roberts called the fee a tax, and then said that this tax could originate out of the Senate, which is blatantly unconstitutional. And that was because he had judicial review, which the Constitution never gave him. Chief Justice John Marshall in 1803 invented the power of judicial review out of whole cloth. We never had it before. The power to decide what the Constitution means was supposed to be left to the states. The states are the party to the Constitution, the states and the people, and that goes all the way back down to the 10th Amendment, which says that those powers not reserved in the Constitution are left to the states or the people respectively. So that's where the real power center is in the Constitution, and that's what we walked away from.
I will defend my Constitution, both U.S. and state, which alone protect my inalienable God-given rights.
I will defend my Constitution, both U.S. and states, which alone protect my inalienable God-given rights.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you for that.
She talked a lot about the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists, and Patrick Henry is a good person to mention.
Absolutely.
And then she traced that to the Confederate South and the Civil War, and then to today's fight against government tyranny.
Certainly.
And can you understand why people who, especially the ones who interpret the Civil War as a fight over slavery,
Right.
and then also people who interpret the ratification of the Constitution, even though Patrick Henry did oppose it, he did say, once it was ratified, okay, we're one country. And so the people who want to be a diverse and inclusive country, hear that sort of, we're the lineage of the Anti-Federalists and the Confederacy, they hear that. And then you're talking about guns and everything on top of that.
Right, right.
Oh my gosh, we're going to go back to past conflicts.
Well, one of the things that we have to remember is there's a lot of people sort of adjusting things to their view on both sides of that issue. Back during slavery, Congress passed a horrible law. It was called the Fugitive Slave Act. And what it did is it required people who captured runaway slaves to capture them and return them to their owners lest they go to jail. It was a congressional law. Well, Wisconsin said that that was the worst idea they've ever heard, and they did something called nullification. They passed a 10th Amendment bill that said in the state of Wisconsin, if a slave gets here, they're not going to be returned to their owner. And that helped the Underground Railroad to survive because of that. So what we end up having is with the 10th Amendment, there's a lot of people that don't quite understand what we're trying to do. By trying to restore the original balance of powers at the federal government level, we're trying to make everyone more free.
The way to get out of that is to fall back on our Constitution, the legacy left to us by our founding fathers, and on the basis of the 10th Amendment, nullify any federal health care law that is imposed on North Carolina and interpose criminal penalties on any state or federal official attempting to impose a health care mandate in violation of that law.
Did you tell them about Reverend Barber's interview?
No, I haven't, but I was kind of getting there because I was mentioning all the Civil War references and stuff and how it causes concern for a lot of, not just people of color, but people who are comfortable with today's relative harmony between people of color. And
well, see, that's a big part of it, though. One of the reasons why there's still so much animosity and angst between races is because we as a nation have handled this wrong. First of all, there was a Supreme Court decision called Plessy v. Ferguson, which was horrible. What it did is it allowed segregation in the states. It said that the schools could have a black school and a white school, and it was just terrible. Well, Brown v. Board came along. It was another Supreme Court decision. They made the right decision, but they used the wrong justification. This is actually quite difficult to explain. What Brown v. Board said was that we overturned segregation, which was good, but they created this brand new right out of thin air where they said, this is based on group rights. The group of black people and the group of white people should have the same rights, not separate but equal. Well, what they should have done, instead of creating group rights out of thin air, they should have gone to the Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, guaranteeing to the states a republican form of government. That means every individual is equal under the same law. That alone would have gotten rid of segregation. You are dealing on individual terms instead of groups of people terms, and we wouldn't have all the animosity we have today. Part of the reason we still have so much racism is because the government officially recognizes race. Why doesn't the government recognize us all as individual Americans, regardless of our race? If we want to step away from racism, that's the direction we have to go.